very, very thankful and grateful for everyone joining us today to talk about how can we better improve the results and the learning for our students. What we're going to be going through today is basically one of the pillars that MathSpace is built around, which is formative assessment. So hopefully out of this section, you'll be able to know what it is, how do we do it, and what are some nice and easy ways to integrate these principles into your lesson. So just zooming out a little bit, what I want to talk about first is what MathSpace really stands for, which is this statement. It's our kind of North Star. It's what we do every single day. That's why we wake up and go to work. And we believe that every single student has the ability to grow and excel in maths. And we kind of want to be there right alongside them, helping them whenever they need it. And what's really interesting about working for MathSpace is being able to kind of step outside the classroom, being at the intersection of both pedagogy and technology, and really thinking about what best practice is. And so, if we are trying to get every kid to grow, how on earth do we do that? It's such a large task. And MathSpace, working at MathSpace gives me the space to just kind of like really ruminate and contemplate how to do that. So this kind of mission statement really reminds me of a story of a class of Year 9 students that I taught a number of years ago. And what we were doing is we were coming up to a measurement topic. And so we were just doing things like, perimeter area, some of the lower ability kids. And I thought, look, this is a really great area where we can get them doing hands-on stuff, get them really moving and interacting. And so I created, a 2-week unit of going out to different places in the school, measuring things, recording it. They've got their rulers, they've got their trundle wheels. And, we did a really rich task where they designed their own bedroom, calculating, carpets and wall spaces and everything. And I thought, man, this is going really well. Kids seem to be really enjoying it. And then we kind of got to the test. And they said it and I got the results and I was like, oh my goodness, like it broke my heart because I thought we were doing so well. And this quote kind of comes to mind where, we believe we're talking, we believe we're teaching, but it's not actually happening. And so, in that point, I was like, what happened here? What did I do wrong? And what could I have done better? And I guess really that's the question that we're trying to answer today, which is how do we know when our students are actually learning? And what I realized upon reflection in many years after that is that there were components of my practice that needed to be worked on. And so what I want to present to you today is this teaching model that I've taken from the Department of Education in Victoria. And again, it's just a model. It's not, I'm not advocating it, but I thought it's a really nice way to think about it and frame this conversation, which is, you start off with evaluating and diagnosing, figuring out where they're at, figure out what they need to know and set some goals, and then you go away and develop some learning experiences, and then you go away and then you implement it in the classroom. And just upon reflection upon my own teaching, I think I did really well at the developing and the planning and the implementing and the monitoring, even probably the setting goals part. But what I really missed was that last bit of the cycle, which was, evaluating, and not just evaluating at the end of the unit, but evaluating as we were going. And so what I'd like you to do is, for now, I've told you a bit about myself. I'd love to now hear about you and know about who's joined us today. And so can you please go to formative and answer the first 2 questions only. Unfortunately, in that platform, you can't really restrict students or restrict people from going further. So just do the first 2 for now. And if you can't use formative, please just feel free to type in the chat and write your responses in there. But what I want to know is this: how much do you think your practice currently conforms to this model? And again, that's not really a judgment. It's just, do you feel you fit with this? Yes or no? If you're doing it on the chat, really it's just a scale of 1, which is, you don't really conform to this at all, to 5, you do absolutely everything all the time. And 2, even if you don't follow this model, is there something in there that you might want to work on, or try and adapt into your teaching classroom activities? I'll give you a couple of minutes, and while you're there, I am just going to jump to Go Formative and see what people are writing in. Wow, so I imagine we've got some really gung-ho teachers here. I don't know if you can see the results on my screen as well, but a couple of people are like, yeah, do this most of the time. And then some people do it 50-50, one person. So just another little thing about why I chose to use Formative today was just to kind of show everyone how quick and easy it is to get data. And this probably would have taken me, I don't know, 15, maybe 20 minutes just to set up. And I'd never used it before. So this is including like learning how to use the whole thing. And yeah, it's just a really, really nice way to put things out, capture the data, have it stored for you so that you can kind of look at it at any time as well. So really, I'm playing and experimenting with this platform as well. Let's have a look. Someone's in the chat. Okay, so let's keep moving on. Second question, oh, I was meant to hide the names. Hide the names, so no one can see. What aspect of the cycle would you like to work on more? So some people have said reflecting, some no responses, engaging. Yeah, that's definitely part of my struggle as a teacher as well. Checking on student progress, great. That's what hopefully we're trying to look at today. Exploration, yeah, okay. And implementing monitoring. So it's actually a real mixed bag here. I was expecting definitely everyone to kind of go one way, but there you go. So just before I go to that one, it's probably a bit embarrassing for me to admit this, but I do remember a time when I was teaching where I kind of thought, look, I think I'm doing really great work. I'm putting together all these great lessons. I'm teaching it. And now the ball's in the students' court to make something of that. And, your good kids, they take that, they run with it. But obviously, that there are kids in your class who are just going to, sit back, either be lazy or not engaged or whatever else. And to my kind of stance on that was, hey, you do what you do, and I'll be there to help you when you want it. And I know it's probably not the best attitude to take, but the other day I was listening to an education podcast called the Educational Research Reading Room. And on there, the host was talking to a guy named Tom Sherrington. And I think he's some sort of educational consultant and been a teacher and a principal for a long time. And he said these words, and I'm paraphrasing here, but they really challenged me and inspired me at the same time. And it's this, that our job as educators is to ensure that every student grows. Not some of them, not the most engaged ones, not the switched on ones, not most of them, but all of them. And I guess what this did for me was really help me take ownership and kind of live up to being the powerful adult professional in that classroom. And so rather than kind of taking that backseat, really going, okay, where can I put my foot forward to try and find out exactly how to help my students along their path, wherever they're at. And to do this effectively though, this is essentially what differentiation is, right? And we're all being told to do this all the time. But how do we actually do that effectively? And what do we base our differentiation on? And so this is kind of where formative assessment can help us. So what is formative assessment? Put simply, it's just a continuous cycle of feedback that allows you to figure out, okay, how are you doing as a teacher and how are the students going with whatever you're doing with them? And you know, in terms of how often you do this, it could be done several times a lesson. It could be done, you know, once a week. It doesn't really matter. But as long as we're trying to inform ourselves of the picture of the classroom and the reality of it, essentially is what formative is, essentially formative assessment. Why do we do it? Well, it's to answer a couple of questions. And the first one is this: so we can know exactly where students are, what they know, how they're progressing, and where they need to go. But also, when we use formative assessment in conjunction with other strategies, really the end goal is always to improve student learning. But hopefully along the way, we can also do some of these other things, which as a teacher, again, I really struggled with, which was the engagement piece and getting kids to own their learning. And so hopefully by, and I guess in this session, we're really talking about the top box there of eliciting information, adapting instruction, but also part and parcel is identifying learning goals. Doing those three things today, hopefully can lead to some of these bigger goals that we have for our students. So how do you actually do it? Let's start with the goal piece. You know, it's really, really hard to assess when you don't know what you're assessing. And so it needs to be really clear to both you, the teacher, and students, exactly what the stakes are. And in creating these objectives, we obviously set ourselves up psychologically to be constantly comparing ourselves to, you know, have we completed it? Are we there yet? Can we demonstrate that? And so what we're going to do is we're going to take some time out. And again, do it through formative if you can, but if not, feel free to do it in the chat. How do you know if a student is making progress on adding fractions? So really what I'm asking here is, what are some of the objective markers that we would be able to see and assess to know if they're developing and adding fractions together? So I'm going to take a couple of minutes out, and I'm going to jump to formative again. And I think we're on question 3. And if you don't mind putting in some suggestions here about how to do this. Now, in this particular question here, I've purposely made it kind of like a free form answer so that you can kind of draw your response in. And the reason why I want to do this was to show you that, you know, if you had maybe algebra, or you had something where you had them, you know, you need lines of working or diagrams or whatever, that you'd be able to give this to the kids and they can kind of give you the responses, and that isn't constrained by just having to type. So what's really cool about this, I can see that this person here is that they are adding things as they go, and it's kind of updating in real time. But yeah, I'm really interested to see. I'd be excited to try this out in a classroom. So what do we got here? I'm just going to check the chat, see if anyone's written anything in there. Okay, so we've got one person. Yeah, so adding same denominators correctly, yes, absolutely.
Everyone's having some fun with the typing function, or the drawing function, I should say.
It's cool. Now.
We can see some commonalities there, though, with the comments on the chat starting with same denominators as a point for a marker, a first marker.
Now, what's really interesting is, like, I subjected my wife to this presentation, and she's an early childhood teacher, and she started way back. She started with, can they even add? And I was like, whoa, that just blew my mind. You know, like, we can go back really, really far if we need to. And for some of those lower ability kids, we do need to. So let's keep going. This is a list that I kind of predetermined. And, you know, this is not exhaustive. This doesn't go back very far as well. We're probably looking at what, maybe year 6, year 7 fractions here, kind of going up to maybe year 8 or year 9. But things like, you know, how do they know when addition is appropriate? Can they figure out lowest common denominators to be able to add fractions with different denominators? And so we kind of have these mechanical, you know, skills that they can do. But then there are some of these other ideas that aren't necessarily, what's the word, what you tick off for putting into your summative assessments, but we kind of expect them as like skills that they need to have as well. So, can they deal with mixed fractions? Conceptually, does the fractions make sense to them outside of just being numbers? And can they simplify, and all these other things that may come as extra expectations. So knowing that these are our criteria that we want our kids to hit, then we kind of got to think, well, if I want to assess them on it, how do I do that? And what do I want it for? So what is the adjustment strategy that I want to use? And then how do I collect that data? So a lot of these suggestions that you see here are probably things that you've heard of before. They're not anything new. But what I do want to kind of emphasize here is some of these are very low stakes, right? Like you don't need a 20-minute test. You don't need a quiz to do this. It could be a conversation. It could be a class discussion. And it's just picking things up casually, and that's sufficient. But obviously exit tickets, and if you don't know what that is, really it's just giving kids a question before they leave class that they have to answer before they go. I've seen people do it on sticky notes so that they can say, look, here's my answer, I'm going to stick it, and they stick it in a specific space. So the space might be like, I don't understand, I kind of get this, to like, I've mastered this. So there are lots of, if you search this up, there's like heaps of stuff on the internet about different strategies you can use. So along with those classroom strategies, you've also got down the bottom there your big data sets that you might be able to analyze to gather meaningful information out of. NAPLAN data, as a classroom teacher, I never really got access to it much. Mainly my heads of department did, but might be something you could ask for. Any diagnostic testing that you're doing, or potentially, if you are using waypoints or math space, using that data. Now, what we're going to do to kind of break this up is, and have you stop listening to me, get a break from me, is I've got a couple of techniques that when I researched, I found that I thought were really cool. One's an opener, and one's there for the end of the lesson. So we're going to watch a couple of 60-second clips on these techniques. So hopefully they'll provide some value to you.
Okay, good morning, everybody.
Every day, students come in, they grab what's called a do now sheet. It's a small warm-up activity. I ask them to state the objective for that lesson in their own words and identify a strategy that's going to help them finish.
I'm ready for any do nows if you have them for me. All right, what do we got?
This gives me an opportunity to check in with each student each day, so we have some face time. What lesson are you on? How are you going to get on pace? Is there anything you need from me?
And then let's chat about that Berlin question you had. Okay, so I'm going to do those guys at the table first, and then we'll talk. Okay? Hi, Monty. What do we got going on today?
I do a quick social emotional check to ask them how they're feeling.
I'm sorry, you're stormy. You okay? All right.
Gives them a chance to just have a check-in period that's guaranteed every day.
How much more time do you think you need to finish 6-9? 10. Okay, good. I like that plan.
So that was the first one. And what I really liked about that was just, the idea of just keeping your pulse on students and checking in with people personally. I found it really hard in a classroom to be able to do that to everyone all the time. So, just having some sort of structure to do that, I really liked. Obviously, I don't think I could do this every day, but, maybe once a week even. All right, so the next one.
Okay, good morning, everybody.
Every day, students.
There we go.
Okay, so I would like to close the loop for the session. What happens in a recession, guys? Closing the loop is basically the end to the session. We don't want the kids to abruptly go on to the next class. We want to understand whether they've understood the concepts, and so we close the loop with reflection. Maximum 7 minutes would be my closing the loop time for a session. So I asked them, first of all, the key takeaways.
So price levels fall, and as a result, cost of raw materials eventually fall.
Then they would have reflective questions about how the class went, what was the toughest thing or what was the easiest thing.
What was the easiest, Rananjan?
The effects of the policies that the government makes.
Why was that making sense to you most?
Because we've already looked at the formula a couple of times.
How were we as a class today? Were we attentive? Were we not really attentive? Because we have a lot of metacognitive questions, they become more self-aware.
That's what my question is.
Yeah.
Closing the loop helps me in terms of understanding my students and also how to plan my next session.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so I would like to close the loop.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about, how to do it, and setting the goals, determining what strategy you want to kind of implement, and then collecting the data. I guess what we're going to do is going to go through a couple of ways that we can actually do it. So let's say, for example, you wanted to differentiate your content through addressing the different cognitive domains, meaning Bloom's taxonomy, right? So what's something you could potentially do? Create, a really short targeted quiz where you ask them a question at every level. And obviously I've only done a couple here, but you get the idea. And so depending on how they answer here can then kind of determine to you how a student is working within a particular topic. So again, sticking with this fractions theme, down the bottom is just remembering a fact. Whereas at the top in the create section, we're allowing students freedom. We're not giving them just routine questions, but we're really asking them to think creatively about any number of solutions. So once you kind of post that out, what can you do with that information? You know where they're all at in terms of their cognitive domain. Now, MathSpace does have worksheets which kind of do in some way address this. You could kind of go with your routine questions for all those kids who are kind of stuck at applying or below. And then you do also have your application questions, which you could be able to put together as targeted work for those students wherever they're at. Okay, another really common strategy is, how do you find the groups of kids who are lagging behind, or maybe that one kid who has really specific misconceptions, and how do we address them? And this is really where technology shines, because obviously, tech is all about aggregating data and then showing that data to you in meaningful reports. This is where we've got a continuous assessment tool called Waypoints, which shows you every single student's ability from year 3 to year 10 across every strand and every outcome. And so obviously when you've kind of got reporting like this that has got all this information in it, it's really easy to kind of just come in and go, okay, for comparing and describing two-dimensional shapes, I can see that, all of these guys with green ticks, they've demonstrated proficiency. And whereas these students in gray, they've really shown no proficiency at all. So obviously that allows me then to say, okay, let's siphon off those two gray kids. Let's do something just for them. Alternatively, if you're using normal MathSpace, you can do that through your normal task reporting as well. And by the way, I'm only showing you, one or two examples, but there is so much data in MathSpace that you really could have 4 or 5 examples in here. So in this particular one, there's been a fraction task that's been set, and you kind of can see exactly which students are getting it partially correct or incorrect. And you can see that out of all of the students who have attempted, there's 8 students here, 7 of them have had some sort of difficulty. And so the difficulty does seem to be about adding mixed fractions together. So struggling with the wholes and the fraction section. So again, this might be a misconception that you might need to address directly with the whole class, or maybe with very specific kids. Now, I think this one here of differentiating through varied learning goals really is what most teachers are looking for, which is, how can I set up learning goals that are tiered, that are differentiated, and so each student can then just focus in on where they're at and what's most relevant to them. And so what I thought I'd do is I'd take this time out to again use Formative to ask you for suggestions on what you think you might need, what data might you need to be able to do this. So take some time out, go into formative, answer, I think, what question is it? Number 4 are we up to? And if not, use the chat. So we're just going to read of the chat while I've got
4. That's the one we need.
Okay. So what do we got here? Perform continuous formative assessments and use the findings there to inform and fix the gaps. Yeah, you should be a maths-based rep, whoever that was. Great, yeah, absolutely. Quick snapshots through the unit. Sure. So I'm assuming then people are talking about mini quizzes. Am I correct? Yeah. And I guess that's probably the most, what's the word? The thing that comes to mind the easiest. One other thought that I had was maybe if you had students kind of create videos for learning that basically teach other students how to learn. And then kind of based on that, you might be able to get an idea of what students know and don't know. Yeah, pre-tests, assessment, homeworks, and quizzes. Yeah, absolutely. So moving through, let's go back. Again, we can do this in math space very, very easily by creating a task which focuses specifically on the skills that you want. So in this one here, I've just very quickly just kind of added four questions. First one's is adding like fractions and then going through adding with models, equivalent fractions, and then adding unlike fractions. And so obviously, you know, in these 4 questions, a student might make a mistake and they might be misrepresented in this, but at least you have something to go on rather than nothing, right? You've got some form of update. And if you're doing this regularly, semi-regularly, you're bound to capture those students who are not getting it and struggling and be able to address them. Yeah, exit tickets, absolutely. So, and then obviously from that information, you can then create much more specific work for your students. So, you know, you could create a task just on adding like fractions, another one just on this. You might set this to all your students and say, hey, you pick the one that you need. Technically in math space, you don't even need to do that. They could go do that for themselves. You just need to direct them to the right place. And again, for the other 2 goals there, the same thing. I think the last suggestion that I want to make is really based around what MathSpace was kind of, how MathSpace was conceived, which is trying to be that really personalized pathway and getting students to be able to do a lot of the learning and motivation themselves. You know, I guess MathSpace doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles in terms of like fancy graphics and games, but what it does, the philosophy it kind of does go off is success and learning and mastery is its own gratification and its own reward. And that's what we're trying to do. So if we can get kids learning at the right level, hopefully that's going to spark some greater autonomy and engagement. And so again, this is back to Waypoints, which is our continuous assessment tool. You know, a student will get a report that shows them everything that they can do. And so hopefully the idea here is that they go, okay, I'm doing pretty well at year 8, but there's something down here that I haven't demonstrated. Let me go chase that up. Or there's actually this little bit in here that this little gap here that I need to fix up. And then even with this green circle here, I often answer questions correctly. Is there any work that I can do to make that more consistent? So again, hopefully as students use this, what they can do is they can click on any of the outcomes, it'll take them into MathSpace and they can work on that as well. So some really nice ways to do that. And anything that students do that you haven't set, remember that it's all recorded and you can kind of track their progress regardless. So the last part, which is probably the hardest bit, finding the time to analyze. You know, I remember there are times where I've done activities like this, where I've gathered all this data and it's sat at the bottom of a drawer. It just didn't do a lot. And I guess, you know, it did put all of the work that I've done previously to waste. But, you know, this last step is crucial in order to be able to affect or to help you with your data-driven adjustments. And so I guess my only thing that I my only suggestion to try and lighten the load there is to get students to kind of self-assess as well and self-reflect. You know, maybe set up some categories where students can I don't know, identify, and then put them in there. And that, at least that'll give you the broad strokes, and then you can kind of go through further and refine that. But at least, you know, in this space, you kind of know what the student is thinking and how they're feeling about it as well. But back on how to find the time, you know, I do believe that formative assessment practices don't have to be these really large chunks of effort and time that you need to sink into it. And you know, I would suggest looking back at whatever you do in your classroom and asking yourselves these questions to just tweak what you're doing rather than completely replacing. So, you know, what are you doing that's really helping you meet your objectives? And then leave them as they are. But then what are I guess the more pertinent question is, what doesn't provide much value? And can those activities be replaced or improved upon? And again, technology is your friend. It does all the heavy lifting for you. And look, to be honest, you know, I'm a real fan of pen and paper as well, and there's definitely time and place for it. But I don't think I could do a lot of formative stuff by pen and paper. Like, it's just way too much time and energy. So use that to assist you. So, for example, in one of my standard lessons, you know, it looks something like this. I know it adds up to more than 60 minutes, and you know, you'd be lucky to get a full 60 minutes in your lesson anyway. But obviously, I'd chop and change accordingly and take some time out here and put more in somewhere else. But it generally goes something like this: starter, some sort of explicit teaching, some activity, and then some independent work. And so I guess, you know, my question to myself is there anywhere that I can tighten up? So maybe in my wrap up, you know, if all I'm doing is saying pack up, clean up, is there a way that I can introduce an exit ticket or another activity that helps students demonstrate their learning before they're allowed to leave? Or maybe in my explicit teaching, can I find ways, maybe like formative, to gather information as we're going to think about how students are progressing through that lesson and how they're taking things on board in real time. You know, and the beauty about the tech side of things is that it all gets filed away and I can peruse it at my own leisure. So again, work smarter, not harder, and don't do more because we already have too much to do. So that really wraps it all up. And in formative style, I'd like you to do a little bit of an exit ticket for me. And so the last couple of questions for informative, let me just see. Is there something that you've learned today? Could be one thing, could be nothing, could be put as many things as you like. What's something you'd like to try for your next class? And how confident do you feel about checking for student learning? Have a go. I want to see what happens if I click on totals. Ooh, oh, this is doing it by student. Okay.
Just while people are filling those questions in, I thought I might offer another suggestion I heard from a school.
Yeah.
They almost did their formative work as the student's homework for a lesson at the beginning of a 2-week cycle. They then got the students in the conversation to discuss whether they were bakers, mixers, or ices, which were the 3 levels they'd assigned. And based on those ratings, students then worked on the task that the teachers had created ahead of time for that. So they worked faculty-wide to have 3 levels of worksheet every 2 weeks. And students had to complete those in those time. But it helped in that everyone had a level of work that was appropriate, and the students had a buy-in in that too.
Out of curiosity, bakers being your bottom end, and then ices being your top end, I'm guessing?
Yep, that was the way they did it, but they tried to remove the labels, obviously, doing that.
Yeah, cool. Look, I'm glad that the people on formative have found something that they feel that they can implement. So thank you again all so much for your time today. I know that teachers' time is precious. And you have so many demands on you. If you'd like the recordings, we've created an online course that you can sign up to, and it will have all of the recordings for all the 4 sessions on there. Once they're done, it'll also have any extra resources. So basically the reading that I did for this, any the YouTube clip links, any sort of like research that I've done will be posted up there. But there will also be a space for you to kind of consolidate what you've learned today, to just be able to write it up in written form so that you can use it as evidence for professional learning. So, you know, whenever your authoritative body says, hey, like, show me evidence, you can kind of come into here, download it all, and you can take it away with you. So go to courses.mathspace.co, check it out. And we will be adding things to that as we go. And then last but not least, if you want to continue talking to us about any of the things that you've heard today, we're all up on social media. We're just getting started, so there's not a lot on there right now, but follow us, like us, so that you can see what we're going to be putting out. And there's big plans for lots of teaching and learning resources and insights. So thank you all so much for attending today.